I've been really trying to figure out how to take the electronic drums and bring them into a usable situation, not only in live, but also in recording. So I've been going back and forth with that. So.
All right.
I
Is that the little QSC mixer that musicians love using because it's real compact and has a lot of input?
It's the size of a laptop. Yeah, it's. I have it right next to my drum set, and I can push a button really easily. The only problem is it doesn't have a direct. The QSC TouchMix 30 has a DAW option, but these 8 and the 16, you have to take the hard drive out, bring it over, and then you can use the raw files from there, but they have like a little converter to make it easier to transfer over. It just takes forever to do. So I just have to go back and forth because once again, I use those electronic drums in live production settings and live events. And I want to try and get every drum to sound exactly the same because I want to switch up drum sets. And the sound guys always hate it when I do that because one sounds up here, one sounds down there.
Right.
And there is nobody. I have yet to find a video or an article or anything on hooking up an electronic drum set into a live mix for a band.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well,
so
it doesn't seem like it would be that
work on that.
Obscure, but I mean,
yeah, it's wild.
Interesting.
Does anybody know where? Oh, hold on. Never mind. I answered my own question. Thank you for the help.
Yes, I do.
Only on Tuesdays.
And it's complete crash check.
I did the 4K test last night on my fiber. I did it went 20 megs to YouTube, which was pretty sweet. And I got to set it up for 35, but I'm going to run some more tests.
I saw your stats on one of your feeds. It made me nostalgic. I used to have that with AT&T fiber back in my last place.
They buried the lines this morning, apparently, because there was just a cable sitting in my backyard.
Oh.
I reported a couple of weeks ago that I got this new gig symmetrical gig with the antenna thing on the roof of the apartment building, and it's been working well.
Cool. More bandwidth, more better.
Turkey vultures haven't found it yet.
Not yet. I did buy a pellet gun. I'm nervous about taking the stairwell. I'm nervous about taking the stairwell that says it has roof access. There's no indication on the door that an alarm will go off or something. But I'm nervous to open it up. I want to go look at the
antenna. Sniper, you're going to open it up and a flurry of snipers will be running away.
You need to find a
I
teenager.
wonder if you're going to get to the point where you have those. Do you remember the BB cones? And if you hit somebody's glass, it would make this particular thing when you were shooting a BB gun as a kid. It was like a cone. It would have a little dot where the BB hit, and then it would knock out a whole little cone on the back of the glass. I got in serious trouble for that at one point in my youth. Always look downrange. Always look downrange. I actually saw Alex before, so I'm assuming he'll be here.
He's in invisibility mode.
There we go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about digital media production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to have Elk Live on. They do they create this great hardware and software that allows artists to integrate with, basically play together remotely. so that we're going to be talking more about that. We'll have Björn Ehlers and Max Gendebien will be here in the second hour to talk about it. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Tlalak Lopez Waterman starts us out today. I heard Micah Sergent mention on MacBreak Weekly yesterday that iOS 17 will allow camera capture in iPad and maybe iPhone. I cannot find any info on this. Will the developer beta do this yet?
Go ahead, John.
First thing we did on Monday, downloaded the beta, and it does work on an iPad. Chris, do you remember which webcam that Jack plugged in?
I do not.
Yeah, he's only got an OBS bot and a Brio, so one of those two cameras, and it was working great.
So, given that a presenter, the Atem and the presenter show up as webcams, have you tried connecting an Atem or a web presenter to the iPad? Because that would be something we're really interested in. Like, that's a super, super interesting thing for us to see.
We have both those. We can try it out.
Yeah, let's try that out. All right, next question.
Next one comes to us from Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. Yamaha has dropped it. They've just announced the DM7 series Dante-based medium format mixers, 72 in on the small, 120 channels in on the larger. Who's going first? And he's got a link there to Yamaha products.
They look great. I don't know. There's a lot of us with QL1s and QL5s that are looking at these and going, wow, that's pretty nice setup. These are the step up, I think, above the QL and CLs typically. They're, it's been a killer line. So, or that area. So it looks pretty impressive. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's very impressive. And I do know that there is an office hours person that does have a DM7. Of course, I'm not going to say who it is. Mm-hmm. So I'll ping him and see if he's willing to come on the show and talk about it.
Sounds good. All right, next question.
Jonas Dottel in Stuttgart, Germany. Apple quietly released a DirectX 12 translation layer. How do you think this will affect gaming on macOS? And there's a link there.
Go ahead, John.
Wow, whoever caught this had some really good eyes, because there was a little box up in the window that showed DirectX running on Rosetta, which means that it will probably be too slow. So I don't expect any major movement in this area, but it's novel.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, gamers are very concerned with their latency, and they spend thousands of dollars to reduce their latency by just 2 milliseconds. So any kind of DirectX translation layer that goes in there is going to cause more latency, and then if it has to be used under Rosetta, that's even more latency. So I doubt gamers are going to be jumping on that bandwagon.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'm more interested to see if how the graphics are going to start to work in live streaming, how like Ecamm and Wirecast are going to utilize this for their stuff. So it's going to be more than just gaming that's going to be affected on this, and I think this is a good thing. Could be vMix could come over too.
Yeah, I think it's mostly for gamers to quickly preview their games and to look at it. I don't think it's really for release. So I doubt the DirectX translation layer will be used in release products. I think it allows them to open it up and see how it would run, and get a sense of, they talked a little bit about this in the keynote, get a sense of what it'll take to make it actually work, but I'm not sure that they're really committed to, I don't think people are going to release DirectX games into that translation layer. I do think that Apple has the advantage of a unified platform from the phone to the computers to the iPad to the headset. If they want to turn on gaming, they could turn it on, and if they don't have the vision to do that, that's one thing. But I can tell you that they could build games and create enough draw to make it a significant gaming platform. They're just not doing it yet. So we'll see if they actually turn that on or not. There's a thing called money that makes it a lot easier. You build a first person shooter, and then you put out cash prizes. People will show up because it's just, to the gamers, it's just a business. Next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada is up next. I haven't heard much about Vision Pro personas. Maybe I've just missed it. While we've all been promoting a higher quality live image, what do you feel the reaction to a high-level scanned avatar of yourself, and how much can it be customized?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so Alex, I'm looking at your image here, and I'm noticing you have the background colors off. Are we doing colors off or background lighting on or off?
No, I had to fix something and I forgot to turn them on. That's okay. It's not. There's no.
Is it okay if I turn mine on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'm only half joking about that. The thing about this avatar thing that I find very interesting. We had a discussion a couple of months ago, maybe. I think it's NVIDIA created some sort of a plugin that would take people's eyes when they're looking off camera and make it magically look like they're looking at camera. And Alex, you said, well, that's great until it doesn't work once. And then all of a sudden you're fixated and you're staring at these fake eyes, these adjusted eyes. I think this avatar thing, the persona, Craig called it, I think it's cute. But I can't imagine sitting in a business meeting talking to somebody like that. I can't imagine somebody, scolding me or, talking me down because we didn't meet their objective on a project when I'm talking to a cartoon. Like, that's not real. And what's going to happen with the mouth? It has all these sensors looking at my eyes, but what is the mouth doing?
It has sensors. The sensors at the bottom can see your mouth as well. So it can,
okay.
It can see it, yeah.
And they'll be delayed from the words that I'm saying because it has to think about it and it has to draw it. I mean, I can't imagine.
I think if you look at Memoji, they've been working on that for a little while. Like,
okay, but do you really want to have a business meeting?
I'm just saying that those things.
I'm asking the rhetorical question to anybody who's thinking about this thing. Do you really want to be involved in a meeting with a client as a cartoon?
Yeah. No, I'm 100% behind you. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, what shocked me, I remember the experience we had here in office hours a little bit less than a year ago, and we all did Unreal Engine stuff, and we were doing our avatars for a particular show, and how painful that process was for me. Even though I went through Unreal Engine's character generator thing, and I spent hours in there, what came out the other end was so far from what anybody would consider recognizable for my cartoon avatar that it was insane. I just said, no, this is not ready for prime time at all. What they showed on the Apple demo, though, was essentially turning the unit around and doing a scan. And what was created in the virtual screen on the front so that people could see your eyes wasn't perfect, but it was so many light years ahead of where it had been when I tried to do that in the real world that with the other tools that I thought, my gosh, this has come just gigantic distances towards a captured scan that mapped and could turn around and become real-ish, that you take the same amount of time forward. I have no idea where we'll be. It could be really fascinating.
Go, Jeffrey.
First of all, Fenwick, to answer your question, it's not only just a camera that's pointed at your mouth, but it's also using the voice. Character Animator does this. Adobe's Character Animator. You can actually turn off the vision thing that they have, and then you could just talk into it, and it's just assuming how the mouth positions when it talks there. If you watch the video again, and I watched it really closely, the big thing, just as Chris said, was the latency. You could see somebody, blinking their eyes, and then all of a sudden that visor blinks just an ever so fraction of a second later. It's always going to happen that way. I don't know if we're going to get anything that's going to have a real-time mode to it, and stuff like that. You definitely miss things when you have an avatar over a real person. So yeah, if somebody says something and I cringe, will that avatar pick up the cringe and then use it from there?
Good, Courtney.
As far as customizing it, I doubt they're going to give you the ability to customize it. But what you could do is put it into training mode or capture mode when you go to set up the device, the Vision Pro, and point it at your more handsome friend, capture their face, and it'll never know the difference. And then you can be that person. Then you could do that for everybody in a meeting, and it's like in being John Malkovich, the scene where everyone is John Malkovich. You know?
You mean I could always look like John Preto? That'd be awesome.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I think we will be getting used to looking at avatars and experience this as we go on. Just see how companies has been used to using different type of video communication tools, and I think we're getting used to it, and the quality is not as important as we think.
I think it's pretty important. Like I think that the I think that if I knew a bunch of people were coming in virtually and I had the headset, I would specifically not use the headset, because I know that I would have more power in the meeting. Like if you're talking about a power move, the power move is a great camera and a great mic over top of everybody else that are virtual. I would get my projects done first. Like, I can promise you that if I came in with this camera and this mic and a setup against other people with avatars, I have a better chance of locking the deal than they do. And that's something that is a tricky thing. It's not that people won't get used to it. It's that you can very quickly be, stand out in the crowd, be 6'7" in the crowd by just not doing what everybody else is doing, because it is a lower quality version. We should not, it's a lower quality version of everybody else. Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I think what we saw yesterday was either a mock-up or a pre-release product. There's another year before, 9 months before that product hits the market. That will be version 1, then there'll be version 2 and 3, and I think one should be very careful about assuming anything you saw yesterday is the end goal here. I think 2 other quick points, if I could. Second of all, we may be entirely the wrong generation to have this conversation with, and the next generation may not have the same worries that we do about this. But if it's really important, pick up the phone, be direct, one-to-one. That's always the more effective way of working.
Good, Chris.
If you want a real power move, Alex, it's not 6'7". It's learning how to stand like this and mean it. Like, I want to change my framing to a wide shot just so I can come on office hours every day and stand
the Federighi
like that.
power stance.
That was quite a power stance that he had there. It was pretty funny. I do think though that there people not complaining and people subtly not, reacting to something is very different. So people will tell you things that what we learned over doing lots and lots of feedback from people who came to our events was to not ask for a lot of feedback and look at behavior. And we'd ask them a couple things. We'd ask them, what do they really enjoy about the meeting? What do they enjoy about the event? What really bothered them with the event? What do they wish they had seen in the event? Those are things that we asked them about, and we found that those would be the most accurate things that came out of people's mouths. All these little 1 to 10s, 1 to 10s, 1 to 10s. People actually don't know the answer to that. They make stuff up for you when you ask them those things because they don't know how they felt. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but they just, and the reason we got into this is because we were working on these events. These are hybrid events. This is not long before COVID. And we were asking for feedback from people, and we realized because when they didn't come to another event, we were asking, why are you not coming to another event? In a nice way, like, hey, we're just wondering what. And it was always like, oh, I just got busy. I just had other things to do. It was a great event, and they had even given us great feedback before. And we realized that they had subtly decided that it just wasn't that important to go. The online audience had decided subtly that it wasn't as important as the other things in their life. They weren't complaining. They weren't noticing. They didn't think anything was wrong. They just no longer valued the event at the same way that they had before. And so the thing is that when we talk about what people will notice and we have to be very careful of separating. The things that I'm talking about are million-year-old lower brain interactions with people. And it's very, very hard to get over. And I will say that we've spent billions of dollars on facial animation, across all these movies. What Apple's doing is very, very, very hard. Like and it's not, if they pull it off, it's great, but getting it much better than what we saw in the demo will be astounding. And so I think it's going to be, we'll see if they can actually pull that off. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. With Apple going behind Unity instead of Unreal for the Vision Pro, is Unity the engine to learn now for VR development and or virtual production?
I think it's really worth learning both. There's lots of reasons to do it, and you're just going to understand the market more. They're not that different. So I don't think it's really a zigzag, but I do think if you're looking at working on the Apple platform, Unity and Apple's tools are going to be more effective than Unreal. I don't think Apple's going to block Unreal from using their platform, but they could if they get back into another back and forth with they did in the past, and they're probably not going to give Unreal or Epic pre-release copies, answer their emails, little things like that. They just don't, so it's not that they're kicking them out. They're just not giving them there's just no love there. So, and that's
they're
Epic,
ghosting them.
They're not ghosting them in the sense that they're not, but they're not, definitely not, so I think Unity is going to get all the goodies all the time. And I think most of all, I think Apple, more than getting rid of Unreal, wants it to be an even fight between Unreal and Unity. That's good for them. Unity was, before the Epic lawsuit, Unity was almost gone from most of our development. Like, it was still around and it still had another business that was really good, but it was nothing like what it is now, because people had a lot of us had kind of forgotten about them. And suddenly, we had, when Unreal hit, everyone started looking at what's going to happen next. And we were all waiting for Apple to mention Unity in a keynote. Well, there you go. They've mentioned them. And so I think that it's not going to be, they're not going to beat Unreal, but it's going to be a much more even thing. And the cost to Epic is pretty high. Next question.
Next question comes from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. I want to create a few 3D plant models. What Mac software and or external hardware, as well as processes, would you recommend to achieve this?
Yeah, there are some plant generators, and I don't know. I haven't had to do it for, a couple decades. That you can hear me typing as I try to remember what I'm just seeing if I can find the one that I know the best. But there are, there's a variety. What you want to do is search for a plant generation tool. And there are, let's see if I do 3D. Obviously there's some that are, the ones that I know of are not, I don't think here. There's one called SpeedTree, which is a 3D vegetation modeling middleware that you can get there, but I don't know what is available on the Mac. TreeGen is the, but you want to do searching for a variety of these things. But I don't know. The one that I've used in the past, and here I found it, is XFrog. XFrog is what I've used. XFrog plants is what I've used in the past. So it's a, the stuff is pretty good. It depends on what you need to build. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I'm just astonished that the plant recognition, which is the other side of this, creating 3D plant models, a way to build them, but there's so much activity that's happened, and you point your camera at this plant and it's going to go back and identify it, that I can't believe that they wouldn't turn that around, and once you identify it, find some way to get a model of it from a library somewhere and bring it to you. I just think that's a really kind of hot area out there.
Yeah. So it is. There's a lot of stuff already out there. It's just a matter of when you build it from scratch, which we used some of this software in the past. You can build in the behaviors of the trees as well. So wind, all kinds of other things are available in some of these plugins. So, but I don't know what's available on the Mac right now. So we'll have to maybe ask that again on Tuesday when we have some of our other CG experts. Tuesdays are kind of our graphics day. Like today is an audio day. And today is a good day to ask audio questions because we have a lot of great audio experts here. So go ahead and jump in with those. Next question.
Paul Wallace out of Austin, Texas says, discuss the Nomono Sound Capsule, a Wi-Fi enabled recorder that combines 4 compact wireless lavalier mics with 360-degree spatial audio microphone into a spatial audio microphone array. He's got a link there.
Go, George.
Yeah, I'm seeing it for the first time, like many of us probably, and it's very clever. On first blush, you see $3,000, and you think, "Oof, how many podcasters have that kind of money?" And this probably isn't for many podcasters, probably for the production companies that want to really streamline production. But it's interesting; they're combining these now apparently very normalized square lavaliers into the design. I think that's because of Rode and their video mic goes. Everybody's getting really accustomed to seeing a square on someone's shirt. And, I think what they're trying to do is use a heck of a lot of cloud AI learning systems to take all this audio information and just make an incredibly good sounding show out of it so the users don't have to know what they're doing. And lastly, they did come up with a way to answer that big upfront cost by having a $129 a month option, which if you are running a podcast network is probably quite, if it does a tremendous amount of the work for you, including dealing with background noise and mitigating acoustics issues and so on, could be well worth it. But it's a very cool looking piece of tech.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think it could be good for audio-only podcasters. If you're shooting video at the same time, it would be problematic because it sends all the audio up into the cloud. It's Wi-Fi based, and I don't think it interfaces with a computer, so it connects directly to their Wi-Fi servers in the cloud. It sends all the raw audio up to the cloud where it's processed and stored. That's where the recorder is. So you're not going to hear the results until after the processing is done. So it's probably not in real time, or maybe it could be close to real time, near real time. But the delay would probably preclude it from being used as the audio portion of an audio and video podcast. But it looks interesting. It looks easy. It'd be interesting to see how they combine the lavalier sound with the omnidirectional mic array that sits in the middle of the room to give it more of a present, less of a close mic sound and more of an ambient sound of a room. But we'll see how well it works. Nobody's heard it yet.
Good, Jeffrey.
Yeah, just a ton of work for any type of podcast or podcast editor. And then if you're sitting in a room that's already tuned to be like a regular podcast thing, will people accept the fact of having little dongles on their shirt rather than talking into a microphone like we see a lot of podcast areas? I think this will be great for like the live audio type situation. You bring this thing, you set it down on the table at a restaurant or at a live event or something like that, and then you have a conversation where there's this vast array of background sounds that you hear at any conference, and I think that will be perfect there. But when it comes to home podcasting, I'm not exactly sure where they're intending to do that. If enough podcasters have a round table where everybody can sit around, it would also be nice if they could actually figure out a flow. So if people are walking around the table, will the lavalier mics follow and then move their audio around, or will it keep them in a static area and just have the ambionic sound in the middle do what it's doing?
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, Courtney made a good point. I mean, this definitely seems to be filling a very narrow niche nowadays, especially when there's so much more pressure for audio podcasts to be on video, to be visible, and being able to, you have to be able to integrate video into this some way, I think, if it's going to sell at 3,000. But it's really great, clever tech, and a lot of that does come out of Europe, which is interesting to see. So who's going to get one first to demo? We'll find out.
Yeah, I think that moving people away from their mics, I find isn't super successful most of the time. So putting something in the middle of a table, the processing I haven't seen to be successful, even when we have a lot of time to run the processor. And I think the problem really is that the podcast market is tightening. So this is the thing that we have to understand, is that everyone was throwing things against the wall for the last 2 decades. But now what's happening is the money and everything else is tightening. And the ones that are going to survive are the ones that sound the best, that potentially look the best, and have a great design that are unique. Fiddling around with cheap, easy ways to do this is probably not very competitive. I can see how this will sell to corporate folks who go, oh, I can just do a podcast for the company. But, I think Shure was doing some kind of podcast and their audio was bad. I'm like, you're Shure. How can you do that? How is that okay? And so the thing is that people, someone gets sold on the idea that we can do these podcasts for a couple $100 each, and it's going to be, great marketing and everything else, but it just does so much damage to a brand to not come out clean. And the reality is that, I can take, a handful of SM58s, or the Stellar X2 or a Shure, SMB7 or MV7, I can put those into a little mixer, like a Zoom mixer or a Mix Pre, and I can run circles around this device, and for about the same price, and so if you said, would you like this, or would you like a Mix Pre 6 with a bunch of Heils or a bunch of whatever with some little stands and a little box, if you put me into a cage match with this little device with that at the same price, I will crush it. And sure, it's a little more complicated, but not that more complicated. And if you're going to do something over and over and over again, it might be worth just learning how to use it. And so I just don't. I teach 12-year-olds to do podcasting. Like it's not. This isn't like rocket science of how to get this stuff. You can make the little levels go where they need to go, and so on and so forth. It's not. Especially if I'm trying to compete with the sound quality of this device. That's the thing. And so there are a lot of people in corporate that in education that want things to look clean and be easy, and you just push the button and it works. But making content is easy to make or easy to ingest, rarely easy to do both. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you make some good points, Alex. And I think, maybe what they're doing is doing an auto mix of the 4 lavaliers and laying it over a bed from the central microphone as a background to fill in the holes when the lavaliers are muted. But I was going to point out that, spatial sound is probably not something for podcasts. I think I listen to most podcasts, on a portable device in one ear or in the car, in the car. And we don't need to hear spatial audio in the car when you're trying to just absorb what the people are saying in a podcast. It doesn't add anything to have, one person coming out of one speaker and another person coming out of another speaker, because it's going to be harder to hear in the car because you're closer to one speaker than the other speaker. I think it's more of a gimmick for a 360-degree spatial sound in a podcast. Podcast is to deliver information, not to set up an environment, or a listening event.
Yeah, I think that I will say in the experiments that we've done so far with covering events, hearing that having that ambisonic mic has made a difference. It definitely makes you feel more like you're there. I think you need to be able to attenuate the voice from the other bits and pieces. And I think that if you're getting a lot of nat sounds, if you're out there doing an NPR style or a This American Lifestyle, I think that people would, if they knew that they were going to get spatial, especially Apple users that have that capability kind of built into everything, I think they'd be more likely to listen to it that way. And so if it's just raw someone talking, I agree with you that I don't think that would make sense. If it is, I think if you're trying to create more of a mindscape kind of experience with it, then there's some interesting opportunities. But I don't think this provides that. Yeah, go ahead, George.
Yeah, one thing that is clever in terms of panning that Clubhouse does is when there's multiple speakers, they will start one of the speakers slightly off center and then pan them to the center, which is a really great effect because it does separate out all those voices, but it doesn't make you continually hear them in one ear. And they never start all 4 hard. They don't start hard pan left and right. It starts a little off center, just enough to differentiate the voices, and it's almost like an accessibility thing, maybe. And then they start panning towards center as they continue speaking, and it works beautifully. It's a really cool feature of Clubhouse, and Clubhouse is audio only, and that's something that there's a community around it, and maybe a tool like this would be amazing. And
they're still around. The Clubhouse is still
there's still this. It's like everything like this. There's a community that grows. Mm-hmm. All the people that were having fun with it for a while fall away, and that community coalesces around. And especially in voiceover, where people still do not really want to be on camera. Right. Clubhouse continues to thrive.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I'm thinking they're trying to fix physical laws, and we've been into that with ambisonics also at NAB, and of course it's beautiful to listen to, but I'm skeptic to this. What I also see, I read the content from the webpage. They are also trying to change how you do it. So they are similar like we do on Frame.io. You upload it and you get comments, and so they're kind of trying to get into the whole value chain. And I'm not sure that is a success factor.
Next, a quick reminder that you can ask questions. We still have some room in the first hour, and Elk Live will be with us in the second hour. So if you check out Elk Live online, then you can check that out. Start throwing those questions in. The last time they were here, it was pretty awesome, and they've done a lot since then. So we definitely expect a great second hour. So check out Elk Live and ask some questions there for the second hour. And of course, you still have room to ask some questions in the first hour. Let's go to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. What's the most effective entry point into developing for the Apple ecosystem? Is CodeWithChris still the champ?
I use CodeWithChris, so I think it's good. So that's what I'm fiddling with. I haven't found one that I liked better. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. What are the most useful of the 370 templates that Bitfocus Companion offers for the Stream Deck?
I go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by templates. I know that there are a couple companies that have templates for the Stream Deck. Nothing for Companion. If you're talking about the buttons, like for instance, when I load my PTZ Optics, when I loaded that, it gives me button options, which then I can put together in my Stream Deck. Then those are very useful. And for me, the biggest thing is just creating my own templates, because I do a lot of things that a lot of other people don't do. Like for instance, my studio is in a different room, and I can control everything through my Stream Deck here and through Companion here. And then if I go into my studio, I can do the reverse and then have everything come to this computer and do the switching from there.
Good, Ronnie.
It's so many different templates, and it depends. So we use a lot of the things for Blackmagic equipment, and we use a few for the mix effects to control the Atem mixer. So, and we also do stuff with the sound mixer. So it really depends. I'm not sure there is one single question to this. It's a lot of answers to this.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from George Witham in Venice, California, here on the panel. Is the Logitech Mevo camera system stable enough via Ethernet to rely upon for a 2+ hour show? I've spec'd it for a budget podcast network studio.
Good, Jeffrey.
So with the Mevo Start, when they first brought it out, they said that they had a 6-hour battery in it. And I tested it, and there was 6-hour battery. It didn't have NDI at the time. And then NDI came in, and I felt it was more like a 4-hour battery at that point. Bringing in the Ethernet, especially if you bring in the Ethernet dongle that they supply, which is like $150 or something like that, you can also connect up external power and use it that way. But you should be able to get 2 hours out of that without a problem. But if you're using a dongle that's not approved by Mevo, I found that it drains the battery like no tomorrow, and then you have problems.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, it's going to be a permanent install, and I have included into it their $150 PoE adapters. So we're going to go full hardwire, and things will be mostly fixed location. I just, they got a $42,000 gear quote. I made it $6,000, so I'm a hero, and I still make money. So
how much are the Mevos?
The start kit with 3 cameras is just shy over $1,000. Then you add the adapters at $150 a camera. So yeah, it's still reasonable. Is it the same as 3 old iPhone 8s, through OBS? Yeah, pretty much. But it's just that super clean, simple install. Still feels professional, even though they kind of look like a webcam. And I feel like it's going to fulfill their need, but I'm sticking my neck out, speccing something so new for a project like this, but we'll see. I'll report back.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, George, it sounds like it's probably a done deal and you can't change it, but I would be...
It's not done deal, not quite.
Well, so I would be leery of, first of all, do you know what they spec'd at 42,000? What kind of gear they were?
Yeah, you guys all use it. You know what it is. Atems, cameras, SDIs.
Dude, I don't have 42,000 on my desk here.
Yeah, well, the cameras were 3,000 plus. They were PTZs. It was a pretty high-end rig,
And how many of them?
4 cameras. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could still be a hero if you cut the budget in half. And you might be able to have something that, you feel a bit more comfortable relying on. I don't know, just a thought.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So a couple other things to keep in mind. First of all, they say that they can do 1080p, but there are certain caveats to that. Like for instance, if you pinch in to frame somebody through the app, it will drop it down to 720p. If you're using NDI, it says that you can do 1080p, but I found once again that I've been getting 720 rather than 1080 on that. I use these cameras basically for overall shots. Like for instance, when I do like a recording a band, I'll take the Mevo camera and I'll put it in the crowd, and then I'll get crowd shots. Because if they're a little pixelated, it really doesn't matter in that case. But anything that's pointed at a person or a guitar or anything like that, I use a higher end camera to do that. So if you're going to do that, I'd still have a couple higher end cameras just in case, and maybe even the Mevo Plus, which you could still get.
Go ahead, Courtney.
The only thing that stuck out, I was looking at the specifications that stuck out to me, which kind of scared me, is it says under video, it says maximum video frame rate up to 30 frames per second. Up to means it might be lower than 30 frames per second.
Typically my approach to most of those, if someone had 42,000, I come in at 55,000 and I usually still get the job. And the reason that I do that is I really talk to the quality of, what it takes, the brand, I don't know what this company's trying to do. If the content is, they're just trying to check off a mark that we have a little studio, then having something that's low cost makes sense. The real issue is are they trying to are they trying to use this really as a brand recognition tool? Are they trying to push themselves forward? And when they do that, you want to start doing the things that add gravitas to the piece. So that's the shorter depth of field. That is the great audio, great lighting, and that costs money, to do it well. And the problem is that the real challenge that you get yourself into is you go, okay, I've got a less expensive studio, and they saved money once. But if they start looking at other ones and come back to you and go, why don't we look as good as that? And we had $42,000 to get to nearer to that, then you may end up with folks that were happy. The CFO was happy, or their controller was happy, but everybody else is not happy, and that doesn't end up being what a lot of times I have a tendency to go bid over what people wanted, but what I give them back is something that they can't go back to the cheaper version. Like they can't go back to where that was, because they can see the possibility. It's really not about cost. It's about value. What is the value to the brand? What is the value to the conversation, and so on and so forth? Because you can have something that's really expensive that has more value, per dollar than something that's less expensive. And that's the thing you have to kind of keep in mind. Yeah, go George.
Well, I was made very clear, very upfront that, as you mentioned earlier in the show, that the ad revenue for podcasts is plummeting, and he made that very clear to me. And that budget was a really big deal to him. So it's hard to find the maybe going that low is doing them a disservice. But we'll have to see, because
I guess what I would say is that the ad revenue is plummeting, but having a cheap looking or sounding podcast is death.
It won't be cheap sounding, because I won't.
Well, I know it's you.
It'll be all SM7Bs, Rodecaster Pros. They're all on the high K multimedia, $500 arms, the whole thing.
Exactly.
But
so it'll sound great. I'll be out to your point. I don't know if video matters in podcasting. Like, I just don't know if it really matters, especially if it's just roundtable discussions.
They want that look of the Conan O'Brien podcast. Oval table, four mics, people sitting across from each other,
Yeah. I mean, simple. I just want to say these have been really successful for us.
Yeah.
I would use these over a Mevo any day. It's actually a better sensor. And
how long can you run the cable on those? Like, if you really want to have them around the studio, then run everything back to
So I'm still looking for longer cables. Right now I'm at 10 feet, so I can't get very long. I know some people have suggested fiber ones, and I'm going to order some fiber USB-Cs.
That's right.
For straight copper, even though they say they're Gen 3.0 or they're 3.2 Gen 2, at 15 feet, they're not turning on. So gotcha. I'm still working on that. But I will say that these are for a couple of the cameras. I think that you'd have a more solid signal and more control. And I will just say that Mevo has probably gotten a lot better, but every time I've touched it, it broke. Like, and maybe it's just me. Maybe I have a magnetic personality or something in it. But
well,
literally every single time for almost 10 years, when I touch it, it just immediately goes, whoa, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it does concern me. There aren't a lot of like great long shows online saying we use Mevos.
No,
and all the reviews are paid reviews.
Yeah, it's not been a good experience for me. That's why I will say the little warning.
Plan B in my pocket.
These are pretty good. Next question.
Thanks.
Next question comes from Fred Eric Eckert in Bad Herrenalb, Germany. If you need to move your mic out of sight of the camera in your setup and money does not matter, what mic would you choose?
Go ahead, Chris.
As you know, Fred, don't ever say money doesn't matter, because people spend all your money pretty quickly around here. So much money. But I think the real question is, what is out of the mic out of sight of the camera? The real question is what's your shot? I mean, are you talking about the Craig power stance shot that we just saw, or are we talking about sitting here at the desk? I mean, my mic is great. I like my mic. I think it does well for my voice. It's out of sight. It's a half inch below my frame. It's literally right there. Sometimes it pops in. But that's the real question. It's kind of hard to answer your question without knowing what your framing is.
Good, Bill.
100% agree with Chris. You have to figure out whether the person's going to be moving, whether they're going to be man on the street walking, whether they're going to be at a desk. Those things determine it. I would probably do what Hollywood does, which is typically use two microphones, one a lav on the person that you're going to keep relying on for your close-up kind of presence thing, and then an overhead boom that's fixed on a stand or something like that. That way, if for any reason you get anything going wrong with A sound, you have B as a backup for it. That's how they do most movies. It's not one mic, it's a combination of two, and those are all pretty well known. There's very, very good lavs from Countryman and Tram, and Sony makes good ones, and Electrosonics has good. There's a lot of small capsules, and they're very hideable. In fact, that's what they do most of the time when you're a costume drama and you can't see the mic.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, what Bill says. I mean, I have a Stellar X2. It's out of the shot. I think it sounds good. I have more expensive mics. The 416 that Bill is using, Sennheiser 416, is a staple of the movie industry and has been used for many, many years. And if you see these setups on interview shows, like for 60 Minutes and so on, where they cut to a wide shot where you see the whole lighting setup and the two people facing each other in chairs, you'll see that there's a shotgun microphone overhead over both people pointing at each person that is up and out of the shot. Each person will also have a lavalier on, usually as a backup to that, if they are not afraid of having something mounted on them. But,
go ahead, Ron.
That's the way it's been done for years.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, exactly like Courtney said, and like Bill have, I would recommend a Sennheiser MKH 416 hanging from the top of a stand and out of camera.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have nearly enough context information to give you a really good answer. Unfortunately, we don't know if this person's moving, if it's a fixed studio location where you have control over the acoustic and whole environment. Because the acoustics are great, then the mic can be quite far away and get an amazingly good sound. So yeah, there's a lot of factors. Everything everybody said obviously is totally valid. It's just we don't have a little bit more detail in the question will help us give you a better answer.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with the room as well. So I'm experimenting with this right now. So I just pulled my mic out. This is the same what we had before. Now, as I bring it back up again, you'll hear the kind of the change in my vocal quality that is there, and so that's why I keep it up up here. So I really like to have. It depends on what you want to do. I think the most common thing that we've done is a shotgun mic, right out of right there, just out of camera, is the most common way that we've handled that process. And we've typically used two shotguns. We have a lot of our guests don't like to be touched, so so we don't use lavs. We have one shotgun below and one shotgun above. So one coming up, it's if they lean down, sometimes because we get so close and we get so in there, to get that quality. But the other thing that we do is like I have here in my, I don't have a way to show it to you right now, but I have it's all blankets. And so one of the things that I'm known for some of our clients is I come in with sound blankets and I'll walk into a conference room and blanket half the room, because I hate reverb. And so I immediately go in and just attack the reverb as fast as I can to knock it down. then you can the mics can move away from someone. Like this mic that I have right now at this distance is unusable in this room without the blankets. Like there's so much reverb in my room. And so it's not just the mic, it's the entire environment that you're working in that's going to make a difference as to what kind of mic you can use. You can get away with a lot of mics in an anechoic chamber. Like they all work at a pretty high distance, but once you start to have things that are going to reflect, it becomes more complicated. Yeah, go ahead, George.
Yeah, it depends a lot on the size of the frame too. So I just moved my mic out of frame, and you can hear how much more the room is interacting. I get away with murder because I keep, exactly like Alex showed, I keep a tight mic placement. I've moved mine out of frame, and now you can hear the room interacting quite a lot. So a lot of that all has to go, it all plays together.
Absolutely. Next question.
Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael. The Yamaha DM7 Compact is priced at United States $115,000. I'm sorry, $15,000, and the DM7 is priced at US $29,000. It doesn't. What consoles would these be compared to? The Allen & Heath SQ5 is US $4,000, and the SQ6 is US $5,000.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I would say the thing that comes to mind is if we were talking Allen & Heath, is the D-Live series or Avantis, which is a little bit priced. And there are other brands as well, but D-Live I would think of.
Yeah, I think the D-Live is probably there. And I think that for a lot of people who use Yamaha consoles, they're not looking for a different console. They're just looking for another Yamaha console. I think people get pretty caught up in the workflow of what they're doing. So if you ask a Yamaha person what is competitive, they'll give you other pieces of Yamaha for the things. So it depends on, same thing if you work with someone who doesn't. Now, once you get to the higher end, they get a little bit more flexible between a couple things, but but all of them are owned by the same company. Not Yamaha, but all the other ones that they choose are owned by the same company. Yeah, next question.
Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona. Now that iPads can take USB camera inputs, including Atem video inputs, can you see folks dropping the Mac Mini and just using an iPad for mobile Zoom productions? I just confirm the iPad recognizes Atem Minis as a camera.
Go, George.
I think you're going to want to just have both on set, but a Mini that you can run headless with an iPad, so you have, you've got your bases covered, and it's still, I feel like, a more robust, stable system. Even though the iPad Pro has the power, it's still running iOS, which to me still feels and really annoyingly crippled in so many ways. So, yeah, I think if you can build a rig that's turnkey, reliable, and works every single time, kind of falls into my Logitech Mevo thing. Like, is it just because it can, is that going to be a good, reliable, long-term solution? But it seems like a cool kit to put together and experiment with.
Good, Courtney.
I think for a short show and a mobile show where you got to be out in the field, it'd be great for that. Thing to consider, though, is you'd have to use some type of dock, and I don't know if the video in is going to work over a dock if you're going to power the iPad as well to make sure it doesn't go dead in the middle of your podcast. And also, with a Mac Mini or another computer, I use multiple outputs on my computer because I feed, the second video screen back into the Atem, so that I have the ability to put up other graphics and stuff. So you'll lose that ability because you only have one screen on the iPad, to deal with.
Go ahead, John.
Just imagine your next production. You can have an iPad or a Mac Mini there, and then your goggles, and then you can have all your screens up in front of you.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I definitely want to have another interface, even something like this, which is the YOLO boxes, or it's for any type of portable type situation, something that I'd be able to record and then take it to the iPad and work from there. But yeah, you got a lot of, as George said, a lot of things that cripple that you can't do. So if you want it, if it's easy and bring it in, then do that. But if it's something that's critical, then you might want to use the Mac Mini.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, Jeffrey just stole my thunder. But of course, as the Jack asks, for a small production where you just want to be very, very light on the foot, maybe just try it out.
Go ahead, Chris.
Or my truck setup that I've been talking about doing for a long time. This might be the way to do it. Multiple cameras from the truck zooming off the road.
At some point, it becomes a risk. That's all I'm saying. If you're driving, like you're editing, what happens when you start adding lower thirds? You start adding you start flying the drone that's flying behind the truck that's going coming down to get those
okay,
those
hold
truck
on.
shots.
So listen,
which would be great, by the way.
There's a guy on YouTube. It's called The Story Till Now. He travels by himself. His name is Sean.
Uh-huh.
He does the most amazing drone shots while he's driving off-road in the middle of nowhere. I'm telling you, you should watch a couple of his videos. They're spectacular. The guy is absolutely cinematic. He is a filmmaker, and he drives around Canada.
What's it called?
The Story Till Now. Oh,
how do I get him on the show? Your job is to go get him on the show.
That's
your job. That's your one job for
Awesome.
Tomorrow. I expect a report by Friday.
Drum.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking forward to it, Chris.
Oh, that would be fun. I hadn't even thought of that.
Well, go contact him.
Anyway,
so I think that I'm pretty excited about it. I don't know what I would use it for. I have spare iPads that I could apply to it. I was imagining like an iPad to do the Zoom and an iPad to run Mix Effect Pro, so that you could control do a lot of things with it. I think it could be a pretty slick little setup. We'll have to take a look at that. Next question.
George Whittam again in Venice, California. Anyone try the Acoustic Magic Voice Tractor 3 array microphone for conference rooms?
I have not. I have to admit, but we keep coming back to array microphones. I'm not a big fan, but mostly because I haven't seen very many of them work. If it worked well, then sure. But again, it comes back to what is the room built for? And most of the rooms that these go into are glass and marker boards. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I mean, this is a $400 unit compared to the one that used to advertise on Twit. No, it was like $2,000 to $3,000. So I mean, I had no idea. I just think the product name is really on the nose. Acoustic Magic. So I would love to. Maybe I'll get my hands on one and try it out, because I thought of it, or actually I found it when the Nomono product was mentioned on the show. I was like, what other things out there would work in a podcast?
For podcast, I mean, maybe for conference calls that don't matter.
Yeah, right.
Go ahead, good, Courtney.
I was looking at it. Does it have to sit in the middle of a table, and do the people have to be positioned around it? Because it's just a long.
No, it looks like it's one of those end of the conference room kind of speakers. So you put it underneath the monitor.
Got feet on it, like it sits on a table.
Yeah, I think it would be at the end of your table where it's sort of where the big monitor is that everybody's looking at.
A lot of those sit on there's some kind of thing under in a conference room. There's usually some shelving unit that sits underneath where the TV is. I mean, that's a pretty common thing. Oftentimes they put like drinks and coffee and other things on them. But that's where that bar, I think, would probably go. Next question.
Next question comes from Ketcha Flea, I believe, Gersvold in Tromsø, Norway. I hope I got that close. What are the panel's thoughts on Photoshop Beta's generative fill? Scanning and restoring damaged photographs, I guess, has become child's play.
Good, Jeffrey.
Making small edits like that is perfect. I did a video outside, and I have a small crack in my concrete, and I wanted to take out the crack in one of my thumbnails. So I just did that, and boom, it was gone. It was great. We did another one where we tried to put a smile on somebody's face. That was a little bit tougher. The biggest problem is that it's not the same person's face, because I've also been putting together a presentation where I wanted several gestures from the same person. And I have to do a lot of extra editing to make that look good. The other thing is, and I was just talking to Predo about that, is the vector images. They say that they can do that, but I haven't been able to find it because I'm trying to create a diagram where I want to have computers and cloud and things like that. And I want to have vector images rather than regular images, so I can fix them and make them look pretty much the same. And they don't have that ability just yet either. But once again, this is beta, and this is why we do it, so we can tell them this is what we need, and then it becomes magically there.
Go, John.
Chris, cue your video. Chris did a whole video on the generative AI, which is built into Photoshop beta, and so that little project that Jeffrey was talking about, the smile, one of my friends put this in a Facebook group, and she said, first person to take this girl, they had this picture of this group picture with the senator or governor or something, and one of the little girls had her tongue out, and so she wanted to remove the tongue. Well, generative AI, I sent it back in about 5 minutes, and I got paid $100 to do that. So that's how effective generative AI is.
Yeah, you could probably get into really good touch-up business right now for a little while. Just saying we do touch-up and it's only $20 or something like that, and people just send you photographs and you send them back fixed ones of their loved ones for something inexpensive, and because the average person isn't going to buy Photoshop, so you could probably just do it for them. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. One of our panelists appeared on the show with an Airpods Max. What have your experiences been with the Max as a headphone for production use? Wouldn't the latency be too high for live narration?
Bill, real quick.
Yeah, it's the latency thing. It doesn't appear to be a problem. And I say that I don't have a Max, but I did just use AirPod Pros as a live from the field thing on our coverage from Cinegear, and I was astonished. I put one in and I didn't have a single problem the whole rest of the show. The latency was just insignificant for a live back and forth. It was really a good experience. I can't imagine that the Maxes would be any less engineered than those.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about latency, if you're talking about your own mic monitor back into your own cans, there will be some latency in that monitor feed. So if you want to use it in that context, you may not feel that isn't acceptable. But if you're just using it to return audio from the field or from anywhere else, that latency will be insignificant. You won't, in exactly the context Bill's talking about. I used an AirPod Pro in my ear as well as a listening device, communication back to tower, and it was insignificant.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. Coming from a 15-inch 2017 MacBook Pro, would a maxed 15-inch M2 MacBook Air or an M2 Pro Max 15-inch MacBook Pro be a better choice for audio, IT, and iOS development tasks? And he notes portability is important to him.
Good, Bill.
So I've got a MacBook Air, and I've been really happy with it. The only thing that I'm going to say, and I said the same thing when we discussed this yesterday, I/O is limited on this. It's not quite as limited as we talked about because it actually has two Thunderbolt or USB-C ports, and it has a power separately. So you don't have to use one of the ports for power and reduce you to only one. But it's that I/O that continually says to me, I can use this for a lot of stuff. It's fast. The screen is gorgeous. But there's a whole classification of work I can't use it for because it just doesn't have all the rest of the ports I need to connect to the outside world.
Good, George.
Yeah, I have a MacBook Air M1, and it's been a rock star, and I have dongles all over the place. I have one in every bag because you're always plugging it into a USB-C hub. Anker makes great ones in OWC, and I mean, there are some pretty reliable ones. But if you hate hubs, then you want to go the MacBook Pro because there are definitely more ports usable for you. But yeah, power-wise, CPU, just sheer horsepower, you're going to be astonished at how much more powerful and efficient and cool the computer operates at over your 2017. It is absolutely astonishing.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. What are the copyright considerations for Foley use? Alex has predicted the death of stock photo. Could AI help with diegetic and non-diegetic sound for documentaries and radio-style dramas?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, Foley use is normally used to picture, so it's done synchronously in a studio, recorded live by Foley performers. So copyright isn't an issue because it's all original for each individual recording. I'm not sure about using stock Foley footage, Foley sounds, if that's what you're talking about. There's copyright considerations there. You could generate sounds if the AI gets good enough to figure out what you want and where to put it,
I actually think you're going to see it. This is actually something that's relatively down the middle of what AI can do. So being able to create lots of different sounds in lots of different environments that don't have to be as creative, I think that you're probably going to see a lot of Foley being able to be created that way. And I think that there will be ways that eventually you'll be able to process video and it will add the Foley for you. So give me footsteps for that, and it will time them for them. Along that, it'll figure out what that surface should look like and how it should sound. Will it be as good as a Foley artist? Probably not, because it's an artistic thing. Now, will people use it for their inexpensive stuff to add a little bit of something? Yeah. Will they use it for features? No, because a Foley artist will do a better job than AI. Again, the top 10 or 20% of the market is going to be fine. The bottom 80% is going to be wiped out, for a lot of this stuff, because and the hard part is, how do you get to the top 10 or 20% when the bottom 80% doesn't exist anymore? And I think that's the challenge that we really have with AI. Go ahead, Chris.
I think the real problem is trying to find a computer that can understand that twisting celery sounds like a bone being crushed.
Exactly. If you've ever if you do a search for the Sanken, I think it's the CO100. It goes up to 100K, and there's all these sound effect folks that use it, and they show how they do things and then stretch them out and spin them out, and you just get this whole other view of how they're creating all of those sound effects that sound more like what we expect it to sound like than what it would really sound like. That's the hard part, is that we're not really trying to recreate reality. We're trying to create hyper reality with those sounds. It's a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll do more of that in the near future. All right, we are changing subjects to our second hour, and we've got the folks from Elk Live here, Björn Ehlers and Max Gendebien, and are joining us here and from Elk Live, and we're really excited to have you guys back. How's it going? How's it going there?
Very well, thank you.
Hi.
Happy to be here.
So you were here a long time ago, and I have a feeling that things have progressed just a little. How are things going?
Very well. It was a while back we were on here. I don't even think we had released officially at that point. I think we're still in the very beta.
Yeah, it was all a preview. So tell us where you've traveled from there.
Yeah. So what happened after that is that we released what we call the Bridge, which is a dedicated hardware unit that you could use with Elk Live, which of course lets you play live together online. And then we actually, we continued to perfect the system, I would say. But what the really cool thing that happened now is that a couple of months back, we released an app version. So you no longer need our dedicated hardware, the Bridge. You can actually use it with any audio interface you might have.
Now, do you still sell the Bridge?
We still sell the Bridge. It mainly, right now, the app is only for Mac. The Windows is under production. It will be released sometime after summer. So with the Bridge, it has the benefit that you can use it with any computer you have, because it has internal computing powers, right?
Right.
But the downside with the Bridge is, of course, that it's another piece of hardware that you need to buy. Which, of course,
but in some cases, the upside of it is it's just a piece of hardware that does the one thing that you needed to do, as opposed to being connected to everything else you're doing. You're like, if I want to do something, I can just plug it in and it's just going to work.
That is definitely the benefit. I think what we learned, though, is that musicians have kind of already an environment in which they work. They have a setup, they have an audio interface. And with the Bridge, we kind of ended up creating a new one.
Yeah.
So what we found with the app is that we kind of moving towards where the workflow they already have. And of course, another good thing with the app is that it's free to download and it's free to use right now. We learned the hard way that we really need to take away. This sounds very fantastic to a lot of people. People kind of still refuse to believe that it's true.
Right.
So instead of trying to convince people, we just decided, okay, let's take away as much friction as we can. So it's free to download. It's free to use now. It's still in beta, but after the beta, we will go into a freemium model. So there will always be free use of it. Mm-hmm. Really to take away as much friction as possible, because people really need to try it out for themselves to know it works technically with their internet connection.
Right.
And even more importantly, if it works creatively, musically for them, right?
And what is going to be the difference between the free one and the premium version?
Right now, we're looking at the time limitation, kind of like a Zoom thing, where you, in the freemium you can play up to a certain amount of time, and then you need to restart your session.
That's
something
great.
Like that.
And tell us a little bit about if you can show us how it works, it'd be great to see.
I don't know if we can show it right now, if we have the possibility to show it right now.
I think that's going to be hard, but there's a link to a YouTube video.
Okay.
There's a link to YouTube, and of course, you can always go to elk.live, our website, where there's plenty of videos showing you how it works. and also you can register download.
Well, and I guess that the related to that, how many people can collaborate together?
In the same session, you can be up to 5 people, and that's not really a limitation. Really on Elk Live, it's kind of where, because it's peer-to-peer, so it's a multiple parallel peer-to-peer, if you will. So it eats up quite a lot of bandwidth. So
is it sending the same signal? Everybody's sending the same signal to everyone else, right? There's not enough time to send it between people. There's no server in between. It's all
indeed. The connection graph is a full graph, full mesh with each node connected to each other node. So that's why it's quite bandwidth intensive. There's no compression either, so it's pure PCM. 5 is it's doable with the typical consumer connection. Of course, if you have a bigger connection, technically we can unlock that and actually saturate your connection. But that's not a realistic scenario for most of our prospective users anyway.
Well, and how much bandwidth does each connection take?
Around 3 megabits per second.
Right.
Per partner. So when we're talking 5 people, you're connecting with 4 nodes. So you're around 12, let's say 15 if you have other processors running, especially for the desktop version. So yeah, there will be users that are in a part of the world where that kind of plan is not easily accessible. But there's also a big chunk of users that will have no problem with their connection.
No, absolutely. That's not a large number for most of us here in this.
Absolutely. In Sweden either, but yeah, it could be an issue. Also, a lot of our users are teachers, right? The education sphere is also very interested, and that's a one-to-one thing. So that's absolutely no problem whatsoever. Björn mentioned 5 people. There are plans to expand that to way more, but then it cannot be a peer-to-peer mesh. It has to be server based, and
then once you do that, you have kind of a more latency. Right?
You add latency, of course. You'll need processing on the server side that will add a few milliseconds, and then of course you don't really know the routing, so it might be that you end up adding distance more than anything else. But for certain cases, let's think a classical choir or an orchestra, large ensemble,
or schools where you're actually. I mean, as Max mentioned, we work a lot of schools, and then people who seem to live near campus anyway. They seem to be, most likely they're in the same location, kind of. So then that wouldn't.
That wouldn't be a problem if we extend like that and going server based instead of peer to peer. But that's in the future. What
are the challenges with distance? So a lot of times, we talk about, it's I deal with latency a lot related to music, and for us, every couple 100 miles is a big deal. Like that of how far we're connecting. Does that become a factor as you start to figure out who can connect to who with your software?
Absolutely. The distance is obviously a factor, right? We have the speed of light that we have to deal with, but it's not the main source of latency. It's more routing, switching that becomes a bigger problem. Like for instance, if we were to try between you and us right now, we'll have to go under the Atlantic, and that means basically a bunch of added latency because there's only that many connections between continents. And routing is unpredictable, right? Your packets can take different routes. And that is actually where most of our latency comes from. We need to make sure that we can accommodate for those different routes, packets arriving at different times, sometimes in the wrong order. So there's a lot of things to do there. A lot of packets will be dropped, for instance. Obviously, we cannot use an HTTP connection or even a TCP socket. So it has to be UDP, which means no guarantee that your packet actually arrives where it's supposed to be. Right. So you are going to run into packet loss issues that also need to be addressed on the receiving end, and that will add latency as well.
Well, what do you consider the minimum or the maximum latency to be able to collaborate? Because I like for instance, as an example, I'm near San Francisco. You're in Sweden. The nominal over private fiber, my guess, I'm just guessing on the top of my head, nominal latency each way would probably be about 100 milliseconds, 120 milliseconds, something like that. So it would be a reasonable round trip time.
And that would probably be too much to collaborate. But it's what we learned also from the last couple of years when we work with real users is it really depends on what you mean with collaborating. Because if you talk about playing together live, that's one thing. But we also have a lot of people who actually use it to write together, which of course you want to play together, but you're kind of a bit more loose with the latency. You kind of just want to bounce things off each other. So when we started, we had much higher kind of almost requirements on distance. You need to be this and this distance.
Right.
But we're kind of losing that up because we have people that are using it actually over the Atlantic as well. Sure, they're not playing, super tight together, but they're bouncing ideas off each other. So it's
So we feel like if we can maintain round trip latency below 30 milliseconds, we're basically going to be enabling 90% of our users to actually jam together, play together, and have a good time. Over 30, everything is possible. Obviously, again, if you do a Gregorian choir singing, you don't need 30 milliseconds. You can live with more. And obviously, if you need to rehearse, a jungle beat with the bass player and you're the drummer, 30 milliseconds is not going to cut it. So it's very variable.
It's interesting. I think you shared the link, the YouTube link in your invite to this. We just had a little while back. We had a jazz. There is a famous Finnish jazz band who played a jazz gig in Helsinki, Finland, and they had the trombone player join in from Sweden, our office. So they played a live gig.
And what was the distance between those two?
Oh, how far is that? That's 300 miles or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Mm-hmm. But they played in a live jazz, and that was like funk jazz, which is kind of the hardest requirements because they really play off each other, and it's a snappy beat kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And when we talked to them afterwards, they say they played without any kind of issues, anything. They played just as they would in the same room. Yeah. So it's also interesting on kind of what the requirements for latency, what that is, because these guys could really play like there were nothing. They claimed there was zero latency. Of course, it wasn't, but that's the feeling they had.
Right, and it is. And when you're getting to a point at 300 miles, you're probably nominal, like what we would consider about 17 milliseconds each way. And so the thing is that at that rate, you're only 17 feet from each other. Like when we think about when we convert, so you're relatively close together. In that experience on a round trip. So that would make sense. Courtney, did you have a question?
Sorry, I wasn't near the mouse. I was wondering if since you can have packet loss if you're using error concealment algorithms to fill in any holes of lost packets, things like that.
Yes, we do. There are different techniques that we use, but the main one is the one that actually kicks in most of the time. Usually it's enough from our experience, is redundancy. Actually, our packets are not, 2-track of PCM audio is not big enough to actually fill our packets. So what we do is we send copies of the one before. And so there's always ways to reconstruct a lost packet, albeit not at the full resolution, but I mean, if you have a buffer of samples, let's say 64 samples coming in, and they're not 16 bits, they're 8 with clever crossfading, it's never going to be noticed. So that's the main thing that we do, and we're working It's not released yet, but we're working on implementing more creative way to reconstruct packets for these. Sometimes that happens, bursts of packet loss, where redundancy will fail. Then we need another way to reconstruct that. There are algorithms that are well maintained and well studied.
So like Reid Huffman or something you can use for error
Yeah, absolutely. And then now with AI coming up, then it's also an avenue that we're looking into. But it's true that technically we cannot guarantee that the audio will never, ever, ever glitch. That's just something that the technology cannot guarantee. What we can guarantee is that it's going to be very painless, extremely painless.
And how many channels can you send between? Is it just stereo?
Right now it's stereo, yeah. There's plans to extend that to 4 tracks, but the how should I say, the preferred avenue of development to send multi-track is actually not to send multi-track, but to send a down mix that is remote controlled from your station. You see what I mean?
Yep.
Where it looks like you're receiving 16 tracks when you're actually just receiving a submix and your mixers.
But you're controlling the mix on the other end. So if you're moving what you're doing, you're affecting that. And are you looking at like tying in MIDI controllers on my end so that it controls the stuff on the other side? Or
it wouldn't be MIDI, but some sort of RPC protocol or I mean, there's tons of ways to do that. It's not going to be MIDI, but there's tons of ways to do that. So that's one way to do that.
Well, and to get back to that, I mean, it's something that I mean, getting hardware on one side to control the other side is really important in the stuff that I do. And one of the things we deal with again is latency. So for us, we're trying to lock some pretty high end gear, over 3,000 miles. And the issue that we get into is getting that to sync up correctly
Well, our product is not really the latency. The control latency is not really critical, right? I mean, if
you just want something a little louder. I want this to be a little louder. I want this to be a little softer. I'm not trying to mix a show. You're just trying to get it to where you want it to look like.
We're not talking syncing cues. We're not talking those kind of things. It could be, but that's not something that we're looking into at the moment.
Makes sense.
It's more like you're panning, changing a plugin parameter. Nobody cares whether it takes an extra 50 milliseconds to hear the difference.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, we've got a bunch of questions lining up. Let's go ahead and jump into the first one.
First one comes from George Whittam in Venice. By now, you may have addressed this, but how does Elk Live mitigate sync between several users so that the latency doesn't build up?
Well, we don't. Actually, we don't, because latency does not build up. Because it's a full graph, there's only latency between you and the other guy. What their latency is with the third person does not matter and does not factor in your relationship with me. So it is true that you will experience different level of latency with each of your partners. That's true. But it's the same on stage, right? If I sit next to the drummer, my latency with him is shorter than with the guitar player that sits 10 feet away from me. So that's something that humans are very good at adapting to. It's really not a problem. Now, of course, if one of the partners happens to live in Melbourne and has 120 milliseconds of latency, well, the session is not really going to work very well anyway, right? So again, the typical user for now is the band. So they're in kind of the same state or in the same city, even better. So their respective latency will be very, very similar, and it's not really going to be a problem.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's and curious as to how does Zoom's live performance audio setting compare with what your product can do?
Have you seen that?
We have seen
it's pretty new.
But it's
pretty good. It is pretty good. But try ours and you'll see.
It doesn't really compare.
No,
but
it's good. It is good. You can't really say. But again, the app is free. The login is free. There's no subscription, no credit card. Yeah. Try it out. Compare. You'll hear and you'll feel the difference straight away.
Yeah,
it's really obvious.
That's the polite answer.
Next question.
But Zoom is really good.
Yeah, love Zoom.
George Whittam back again from Venice. Will you make a stripped down bridge without the audio interface, but the host function? That would be really compelling.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
George, did you want to outline what you mean?
Yeah, I build these studios for voiceover actors and some podcasting and things, and usability is critical. As you guys know, working with musicians as well. Some musicians are very technical, some are very artist brain, and having a very simple, dedicated interface box to me does make sense. But like you said earlier, they do actually use a lot of their own hardware. I still feel like there's a reason you invented the box, because there's some advantage over using software, having dedicated hardware.
Yeah, absolutely. But to be 100% honest, that's not the reason why we went hardware first. We went hardware first because actually the core of our tech is an operating system. It's a distro, a Linux distro that has this very particular feature that it actually runs two kernel, one real-time kernel and one scheduled kernel. So it allows on a very cheap chip, like a really low-cost ARM chip, to run sub-millisecond latency on VST plugins, on anything audio you can throw at it from converter to converter. Not from converter to converter, from after the input converter to before the output converter. And that was our main tech. And Clive became more a demo of what this tech could do. And the bridge was originally thought as a demo. So actually continuing the hardware route is definitely an option for us. Whether it's in the form of licensing this tech to manufacturers, right? Everyone's free to license or OS and build sound cards, digital mixers, synthesizer, whatever. That's totally doable. You can even embed it in a wireless microphone if you want. It's 5G compatible, by the way. But the specific request that you have, we actually heard that before a couple of years ago. Someone basically producing post-sync and voiceovers wanted exactly that. Wanted to be able to ship a bridge to an artist and do everything remotely, setting up gains, setting up filters.
And to be clear, we've been asking for this for 15 years. It's not just voiceovers, it's podcasters, it's everybody. We're desperate for a box that is completely self-contained, that no one gets to do anything with, and no one's built one. So
if I have time this afternoon, I'll figure it out.
I think it was actually on this podcast that we got the request last time. So this is
really,
but
I don't think so.
We've asked many manufacturers, and it's
no, but I think there's a lot of different hardware solutions that would make perfect sense.
We haven't seen them.
But it also that we're not really set up to be a hardware company, and I think that's the thing. But we are more than open to work with those who can get some scale into that.
Well, it's good to know that it's interesting that you did start hardware, so you get. I feel like Serato Scratch kind of went a similar way when they came out. They went, I think, if memory serves, they were only running on Linux-based computers at first, because that was the only way they felt they were going to get that rock solid production quality, uptime, reliability. Right. And so you guys did the same thing by controlling all the variables in a little box. And now you're finding that natively, it's not a performance hit at all to do it all native in a Mac, huh?
And
it's not a hit at all. That's a bit of an overstatement, but yeah.
And are you supporting Intel Macs as well as the M series?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Next question.
John Snyder comes up next from Reno, Nevada. What was the biggest challenge when developing Clive?
The biggest challenge was how you connect peer-to-peer to private users. That is actually way more complex than we thought at first. Yeah. All that from embedded device, not from workstation. So right on the internet, if you connect to typically a user will only connect with servers, right? So actual computers that have a public IP. But if you would try to connect peer-to-peer to your brother, your mother, or any other private user whose station is really sitting in a LAN, shielded away from the outside, how do you do that in a user-friendly way? Of course, there's ways to do that. And obviously, network engineers know exactly how to do that. But if you want to be able to have your bass player do that in 2 minutes or even less. So basically a plug and play experience, no thinking about port forwarding and things. That's a big challenge.
I mean, the truth is that not even network engineers want to be network engineers when they want to play.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Next question.
Next one comes from Ronnie Hofsoy in Tromsø, Norway. How do you handle changes in latency regarding resyncing for all nodes?
Well, how deep can I go?
Go for it.
Well, I don't want to go into too many details, but syncing host is not that hard in the sense where that you can always, of course, we use an input buffer, right? So the network thread gives us packets. These are buffered first because we need reordering. We need some time, even if it's just a millisecond, to reconstruct a missing packet or something like that. So we do have a buffer, but nothing prevents us from dropping a buffer if it turns out that there's a desync between hosts. It's perfectly possible. The other thing is that we can detect if there's a drift between the two clocks, and when that happens, we can just trigger an explicit resync between the client, the two nodes, and that is quite easy to do. So syncing was never really a big challenge, not for a company like us anyway. Again, we come from embedded audio. That was never a really big challenge.
Next question.
Comes from me, actually, in San Diego. And I was just wondering if there are any diagnostics built into the software that you can run into. If you run into latency issues, you can figure out which connection that's coming into the central focus might be causing them.
Yeah, well, the health of a connection and the actual current round-trip latency is logged every couple of seconds for each partner. So that's always something, information that we have access to in support tickets and things like that, or in crash reports when that happens. Hasn't happened yet, but whatever. So that's one thing. For the user, it's not that deep. It's much easier. It's much simpler in the sense that when you load up the app for the first time, or whenever you start it, it's going to run a bandwidth test and a speed test, but the same tech that any speedtest.net website uses, and then checks what kind of values you get, and then can actually warn the user that their upload is a bit is on the edge or bad, or it can actually inform the user of very, very large, wide, non-granular problems with their technology. Now, from the logs, we can get much more than that. But that suppose that the user will then file a support ticket or something like that.
Next question.
Cool. Craig McFarlane in Boston, Massachusetts is up next. Have you seen usage in remote music teaching?
It sounds like this is a building business for what you're what
you're
doing.
And that actually was one of the first kind of use cases. Even when we were in beta, we worked closely with the Royal Music Academy here in Stockholm, and there's been schools in different parts of the world that try this out right from the start. And it's interesting that coming out of the pandemic and all the lockdowns, you would kind of think that's the main reason, but actually many of these schools have said that we've been looking for a solution for this for quite some time. There's a lot of, especially the big universities, that moved to kind of online programs, but of course playing together has not been part of it. So the teaching is something that is...
what percentage do you think your business has wrapped around the education market at this point?
Oh, it's not. I mean, it's not the biggest part. I would say the biggest part is still kind of the people like myself that just want to keep the band alive, that want to that plays that has it as a passion. I think we see that as that's the report we're getting. People are writing to us and saying that we had to. The band was dying, and now we're playing more than ever. That kind of process.
I mean, and they might be all in the same city, but getting over from one side of a city to the other, and
that's
being
the thing is when we talk to. I mean, I think when you start talking about Elk Live to someone, everyone is trying to cover what's the max distance. Everyone wants to try to break the system. But actually, when you look at what most people are playing, it's the most of them are quite, in Twin Cities, the city next to it is just an hour or two away.
Yeah.
Very few people have a band with someone in a different time zone. So most people, so it's and as you said, it's kind of, I have an hour to drive there. You want to rehearse for an hour, then I have an hour back, but I have the kids. It's hard to get up.
Yeah. And even for the bigger acts, right? Foreigner, for instance, we collaborated with them for a while. These guys are all over the place, from west to east coast, and they use our system to prepare for tours, and so it works also for them.
And even in their home, because they live in LA, and of course, driving in LA can be a big different parts of LA. That's kind of a big thing, and they can work from their home studios. I don't even know if I should call them home studios, because they're proper studios.
They're studios, but in their house.
Yeah, exactly. So they all kind of prefer working from them, and they use it to write. So I think that's
Yeah. And
absolutely.
For education, I guess our biggest project is a school network in the north of Scandinavia. North of Scandinavia has very low population, so distances between villages and towns is very large, and usually schools are too small to hire like music teachers. So music teachers, they're on the road most of the time, going there and then going there, and we implemented, but at a governmental level, a network of bridges. This is hardware bridges to connect those schools so that teachers can actually don't have to be on the road 80% of their time. And they seem to be very happy with the system, right?
Yeah.
Next question.
George Withenbeck from Venice. In real-world tests, is there any latency difference between using the bridge hardware versus a MacBook M1 or M2 machine?
Well, George, do you want to outline that, George, a little bit?
I guess, it's just, I think we already kind of did touch on that a little bit, but are users going to notice that they're missing out?
No, not really. I think technically, I guess there is a little bit latency, but there is nothing that you notice. I think the biggest difference between the bridge and not using bridge is more like a workflow. Yeah. Since there is a little bit of deeper integration between hardware and software, since we actually built the hardware, so you can control more parameters from the actual app. Whereas if you run, any other third-party hardware, the integration is not as deep. But there's no real from I think if you measure it, you will find something, but from a real user perspective, there is not a big difference. And then you can of course run sessions between bridge and non-bridge users. It's basically different ways to connect to Elk Live. It's the same kind of experience.
Yeah, I mean, would you have a producer? Is there scenarios where you have a producer, quote unquote, or an engineer, quote unquote, who wants to be the master, or it just doesn't? It's not like that because it's peer to peer, I guess.
Right now, there is no master. Right, everyone. Then of course there is some. I know there is some that use it that one kind of takes the role as the master too, if they want to record it or whatever. But technically there is no master. Everyone is equal in the session.
Well, so if I have 5 people and all those feeds are coming to me, do I see 5 channels, or do I just have so I see 5 channels to my end?
You see 10 channels because each sends 2 channels.
Yeah.
And so you have a monitoring. So you set your own monitor mix.
Right. But theoretically, I'm getting 10 discrete channels. If I wanted to record all those channels together, any one of us could record those if we wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. Is there any reason a single node out of the 5 cannot have multiple musicians on that single node? What effect would having multiple musicians on a single node have on the musicians?
Well, there wouldn't be any effect as far as we're concerned. It's just that they are going to need to submix their band before feeding these 2 tracks that are sent over the network, right? So that's of course a big caveat, right? If there are multiple musicians on one node, we still only expose 2 tracks. So if you have more than 2 signals, it will be your responsibility to downmix them to a stereo track or to 2 mono tracks.
But there's a lot of people who does that if only one member of the band lives separately, or even in the use case where we told you about the jazz band playing between Sweden and Finland. Of course, the full band was in Finland and one guy was in Sweden. So you can, of course, we connect locations and not musicians really. So you can be as many as you want in one location.
Yeah. So in that case, this typical case, of course, the front of house engineer had his front of house mix, but he needed to prepare a second monitoring mix to send back to the trombone player, right? So in this case, the requirements as far as a skill and mixing and mixer and stuff like that, these cannot go. I mean, you can't go around them. It needs to happen. But that's the only limitation for Elk Live. Whatever you send, it's agnostic to that. Doesn't matter.
Next question.
Next question comes from Ronnie Hofsø in Tromsø, Norway. How will hardware impact latency? And by hardware, he's thinking of CPU, buffer, sound cards, and interfaces. Is there any good hardware that is standing out as really good used with Elk Live?
No. Any modern USB audio interface will do just fine. There are differences, of course, but we're talking, a third of a millisecond here, a third of a millisecond there. Nothing to be really. It's not going to make a huge difference on your 30 millisecond total round trip. So no, I wouldn't. Now there are manufacturers that are a bit harder to work with. People that have that uses some sort of manager for their input and output and matrices of multiple outputs to different inputs, where how the app gets sounds from that kind of manager can be sometimes tricky. But usually these kind of products are bought by people that know what they're doing, right? You're not going to invest $4,000 on an audio interface if you don't know at all how it works. So, but it can sometimes be a little bit more tricky, but it's more a usage problem. It's really nothing with performance anyway.
Next question.
George Witham, Venice is back. Do you find that users more often than not need to port forward for best results?
No, that is, it used to be the case that port forwarding, manual explicit port forwarding by the user was the best solution technically, but that's not the case anymore. It can still be implemented. We're talking about managed networks, campuses, and stuff where environments where someone requires full control over the network. Then indeed deploying such a versatile peer-to-peer network system is not going to cut it for security reason or for management reason. I don't know. Then, of course, they will need to implement that. But usually we're talking environments where you will have IT engineers or an IT staff that knows exactly what they're doing.
I can tell you that little bridge box is the difference between getting your technology into a major network IT setup. Because I've been setting up studios remotely using a lot of other technology. Obviously, Source Elements, Source Connect, I've known for many, many years, and getting that software into a computer in an edit bay in a huge corporate enterprise network, there are still some who will not permit it.
Absolutely.
and if it was just in a little magic box, then it's probably far. Yeah.
We're obsessed with the little. There's a huge group here that's obsessed with a little magic box that we've been trying to get for again decades because we've just seen this problem that we have. We know that you're not. This isn't your core competency, but we're that you're interested in. But there's a massive market for it. Yeah, go ahead, Ronnie.
In our network or other networks, there are things like Dante and quality of service protocols. How do your protocol work? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, the connecting protocol is basically based on the ICE protocol, the Internet Connection Interconnectivity Protocol, which is at the basis of what we're doing there, or Google Meet or things like that. But that's just a protocol that allows us to find each other on the network, right? Once the connection is actually open, then it's really not much more than a UDP socket streaming out packets. And the quality of our flag for QoS is the same as I don't remember the exact level, but It's the same as voice over IP, so pretty high priority, but nothing custom or nothing. We're not working around best practices. We're not bending the rules in any case, in any way. That's it.
Next
and
question.
then again, no, go ahead. No, I'm done.
Next question.
Ronnie Hofsoy, Tromso again. Do you think it is possible for a DJ to perform live from a remote city where the audience and a singer is on stage elsewhere?
Oh, absolutely. That's the best case. For us, it's the best case. The main reason is because the DJ doesn't care about latency. They play track, right? There's no adapting of timing for them. So no, it's
the singer
easy.
that's local is simply listening. It'd be harder if the DJ was local and the singer was remote, right?
It'd be harder.
Well,
it wouldn't be harder
because
Well,
it
you'd have
seems
to
like-
flow it through, but you'd want to get a mix from the singer to come. I mean, depending on the distance, of course. Wouldn't you want the mix from the singer with the DJ music coming back to the audience, as opposed to the singer would theoretically could potentially be out of sync with the local? But if the DJ is sending to the singer and the singer hears it at the same time the audience does, then they'd be in perfect sync.
Yeah, if the audience is with the singer, then there's nothing.
Right.
There's no problem. Of course, the DJ will hear the vocalist with possibly 17 milliseconds delay, but
Right.
that's not really going to affect.
But it doesn't matter. The DJ doesn't matter because they're kind of driving that show, right?
Exactly. Now, in the reverse scenario where the audience is with the DJ, those 17 milliseconds, worst case, they will be there.
Yeah.
Are they relevant? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Is there a way to nudge the sync together if they are off?
There is, but only one way.
Yeah,
Only
that
by
wouldn't-
delaying what you hear.
Yeah, it wouldn't work.
Okay. So what if I brought it into software or I keep thinking video, but this is all audio.
Yeah,
that
it's
we're
all
talking
audio.
about here. And so there is a way that you could actually bring that into a mixing console and then put a delay on one of the two to actually put that together.
Well, actually, the feature is built in a bit of a clever way where, so let's say you're trying to play with some other person and the latency of their stream is just a tad too much for you. Let's say they're hitting 17 milliseconds and you would really rather have it 12, right? A trick you can do, and that is actually already implemented, is that your own monitoring, what you hear of yourself, you delay that by 5 milliseconds. Meaning that your brain, just like when you record and you have your DAW latency, right? You will have a couple of milliseconds, maybe 4, 5, 7. So it's really not something that is impossible to do at all. It's very natural for most people. But so it means that you will then slightly change the way you send your sound. You will actually do it a little bit before, and that way, in a way, you're taking on part of that latency on your own brain adjustment. You see what I mean? Meaning that you still have those 17 milliseconds, but the feeling that it gives you is of a shorter latency. But of course, it's a trick. It's a psychoacoustic trick. There's nothing magical there, right? But it makes things in certain very, very narrow edge cases where the artist is extremely sensitive to latency, which happens. That is most of the time enough to cross that barrier and say, okay, now I'm good. I can perform, but it's not magic.
Did everyone understand that?
Yeah,
of course.
And good.
Just the side of like quantum acceleration.
No, it makes sense. It's just it's a super sensitive subject. When you start to delay, when you're doing audio against audio, pretty much. I do this. This is my job, and is remote audio to audio, and we just do everything we can to keep reducing the delay. Not ever. We try to never introduce more. So it's next question.
But for us, it's just the difference between latency that is the big problem. So by adding slight latency on yourself, you will actually reduce the difference, which actually will make you feel that you're more in sync.
I think that the problem that we've had in the past, and 5 milliseconds wouldn't matter, but if we start talking about more than that, we start ending up with if the artist hears much more than that, it immediately shuts them down. Like they can't think.
So of course, so that's what I mentioned. It's really useful in very specific edge cases.
Right, when someone's super sensitive to it, yeah.
Exactly, and it's really a trick. There's nothing,
because my experience is most artists don't even notice 5 milliseconds, so they wouldn't notice it one way or the other. But if you start turning it up to where it would really correct something, it would make them crazy.
But on the other hand, I've had artists that swear that they could not play their drums with the Pro Tools input latency, for instance, which is borderline unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
Where they would claim that they can hear the difference between 8 and 9 milliseconds, or between 4 and 5.
Yeah.
So, of course, I mean, if you do get your direct sound as well, you'll hear comp filtering and stuff, and that would be obvious. But if you don't,
yeah.
I'm gonna say, okay, sure, we'll fix it, but in the back of my head, I know that I need to do something else.
You don't move the knob. Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Better yet, have the knob connected to nothing. George Woodham in Venice, California. Can it capture the stems locally and send them to the producer for artists who don't want to figure that out for themselves?
Of course, it's possible. You can record and do whatever you want with
Does your software do a local record?
Not at the moment,
right.
But it's indeed the tech choice that we made to ensure that, if needed, there's always untransmitted tracks to be integrated into a project, right? As I said before, we cannot guarantee there's not going to be a glitch.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're producing a record or doing voiceover for a feature, well, that's not going to cut it. So the way we're going to do it, the way the bridge does it, but it's, well, anyway, is indeed to keep local copies of everything that is sent with an auto upload to the cloud for everyone to be able to retrieve easily. But there's a bunch of concepts to be designed yet. Who is going to own the session? Who is going to get access to those files? Should everyone in the band have access? There's still a bunch of corners that we need to round off and decisions to be made.
It sounds like you've definitely taken that into account, though. I mean, I know on the voiceover side, the engineers their jobs are to be extremely picky about fidelity, sound quality, and everything. And they'll even be doing sessions over high quality connections, but still ask the actors to local record and deliver the waves after. So for you guys to do that and take that friction away from a production, just another way that you guys can kind of, enter that voiceover production world. The engineers will love it, and the actors will love it, because they won't have to even think about, I have to send you a file. How am I going to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah, but that's in the pipeline. That's actively worked on.
Cool.
Surprisingly enough, the challenge is not really local recording and uploading and retrieving. It's syncing. Right, these stems actually started recording at different times.
Right,
and how do we sync them later? Of course, we could just have a blip, and then Pro Tools will align the blip like old school way. But it would be nicer if there could be some sort of processing afterwards to make sure that the files are. It's just a simple drag and drop from a folder into your Pro Tools session, and that's it.
That would be so ideal.
We're not quite there yet. It's coming, but
cool.
We're not there.
That's great. Next question.
Ronnie Hofso, Tromsø, Norway, and here on the panel, what is the latency overhead in addition to the network latency measured with, for instance, Ookla speed test? I guess it is different for the bridge versus the app.
It's
Ronnie,
There's it's probably different, but there is a difference, as we mentioned, but it's so small that most likely it will be totally lost in the noise of Ookla, meaning that the Ookla connects to a server. That's one thing. The server is geographically located, obviously, and Ookla performs a bunch of tests and gets the mean out of that. So those tiny differences that you will get, they won't show up. They won't show up in a reliable way on an Ookla sheet report, a test report. It's just not going to happen. It might be that one time you'll see a 1 millisecond difference, in favor of the bridge, but maybe your next test run will show the opposite. And so these are two gross tools to actually detect the difference between desktop and bridge. We're in the order of 2 millisecond maximum in the worst case.
Right. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, how would you integrate your product into a larger PA and or broadcast system, sending a player mix into the bridge and sending the output of the bridge to the player's monitors?
He's thinking really of live broadcast for this. And it sounds like most of the folks that are using what you're doing are really, it's these classes or it's studio work or it's integration. They're not really thinking about how to take this and put it into an event itself.
Yeah. So what we learned from the couple of live events that we had a couple. The latest one is this video that Björn mentioned with Finland. What we learned from that is that what we really need is a change of the user interface, because a front of house engineer needs different controls. They don't really care about how it looks. They don't really care about finding friends and connecting, starting. They need a UI that is quick and simple to do, and most likely they want more tracks, right? Of course, in a lot of cases, 2 tracks are enough, but to really take on that market, we need to design something remotely controlled, exactly what you want. I think that's where we need to go if we want to be able to incorporate in a live session or a gig with multiple tracks. Let's say you have a drummer somewhere else, right? That's really what we want to do. So basically UX geared at sound engineers and this remote controlling feature to allow for this remote submix to act as a proxy for what you actually want. Now, that means, of course, that if you're using, I don't know, a D6 or any other digital console with its own plugins, you won't be able to process each track separately. But there are ways around that. Again, our tech runs VSTs, sub-millisecond, no problem. VSTs or AX or whatever, of course. So that could also, there might be avenues to do that as well. We'll see.
Here you go, George.
I think when you guys, there was one thing you said earlier that made me go, you guys seem to really understand the users and who you're working with. But when you said that even an IT professional doesn't want to do IT when they're performing, I think that you hit the nail on the head. So once, like I know for Alex to host this show live and make it feel absolutely seamless, many things are happening behind the scenes. He needs to see information and it just feels live and smooth and seamless. But if he was doing the other 17 jobs, he couldn't. It would be impossible. So for everybody to be able to do their job and have it feel seamless and is all about down to that user interface and the ease of use and delegating who gets to do what job. So yeah, there's so much to do in that area. I think you guys are on the right track.
Now, it's important to mention as well that we are a rather small team, right? I'm one of maybe 10 developers. So we need to prioritize, right? So basically, George, how loud you can get to actually request those features will have a direct impact on whether we actually get to it or not, right? So user feedback is really what we crave right now.
Yeah, but I'll get you some. Yeah, we thought about it. I'll start downloading and playing with it and pass it around my voiceover, community, which is a very big one. And see what comes of it.
Wonderful.
Björn and Max, thank you so much for your time. We're really excited about your software.
Thank you, guys.
Try it out.
Try it out.
No, there's going to be some labs here. Maybe we might invite you to a lab where we all a couple of us get together with some instruments in the back end.
That would be great.
We'll output it. Yeah. So stay tuned for that. We'll probably put it into after hours, but we will connect over Elk and then find a way to pump it back in so that we can show everyone how we're doing it and what we're doing. We've got some incredible musicians in the group, so we'll reach out to them and see if we can't pull everybody together to do a little collab and see what actually happens. So
that would be fantastic.
That'd be great. Yeah,
brilliant.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.
You can check out more if you do look for Elk Live and check out the software. It is free right now. So download it, test it. We'll be doing a lab in the next couple of weeks. And thank you so much to the panelists. I can't do this without you. Great discussion, great answers in the first hour as well. Thank you to the producers asking all these questions. We can't do the show without all your questions, without you driving that conversation. We don't have anything to talk about. We get up every morning. I get up every morning at about 5:30 in the morning. And I go, okay, what are we talking about today? That's how we do it. That's how we've done it for 1,100 days in a row. Over 1,100 days in a row is just look up and see what people have questions for. So we really appreciate all your input. And then, of course, thank you to the incredible back-end staff. There are people who are planning all these sessions. There are people who are developing the software and organizing the hardware for these sessions. There's obviously an incredible team that is actually running this session right now as we talk about it, and we really appreciate all of your contribution. All right, we have traveled 77,000 miles today, 124,000 kilometers, and that ends up being 611 bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
611 million.
Did I say just bananas? It's more than
611 bananas. Those are really, really long bananas.
Really, really long bananas.
The Facebook meme going around of a guy in a banana warehouse, which is really cool.
But just think if it was a million bananas in one banana, that would be, you could see it from space. And that's all I'm saying.
You could get them together from two locations virtually really quick using Elk software.
Damn, I thought this was a serious podcast, but apparently
it all pays bananas. As soon as the credits come up, the whisper room starts. There's nothing serious about the whisper room.
The Elk beverage is yellow.
Thanks,
banana as rocket science. One banana that could feed